Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So I was cleaning out my computer and I accidentally deleted my video recording software. I don't know how that happened, but I did. And so luckily I have a video editor program that I'm using that I use to edit my YouTube videos. It's new. I just got it, I think this year, end of last year, and it comes with a recording software, so I'm using something new. Hopefully it works out. Hopefully the audio sounds okay. If it's not, I apologize. But today, without further ado, I'm going to be reviewing A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sara J. Maas. This is the third book in her series. I've been reading this series and I'm super addicted, so this is book 3. So let's get into this, and this will not have any spoilers, so don't worry. So this is much bigger, much thicker than the first 2 books, which, you know, didn't bother me at all. It seems exciting, you know, the longer the better, in my opinion. So I really like this book, and so far between books 1, 2, and 3, I would still say that the number 2 is my favorite, but I still really enjoyed this one, and this one's like a close tie almost, simply because of the latter half of the book. The first half was super intriguing. Where we left the main character, I was really interested in that plot line and where it went, and there were some really creative ideas. There was some political stuff, drama, lying, deception, all that good stuff. And then I thought that was going to go on for much longer than it did, and when that stopped, for me, toward the middle-ish, it hit a very dull part in the middle of the book, and I actually took my time. It took me longer, I think, to get through this book than it did the other 2, which I still got it done in like a week, but I did have a few nights where I didn't read a whole lot because I was just struggling to get through the part that I considered to be really boring. But when I got past that part, it started hitting kind of a main plot line situation, and things kept escalating from there. And then you hit this point toward the end of the book with a lot of battles. And so for me, the battles was the redemption of this book. I would almost give it 4 stars in terms of my excitement level for it, because while I was excited for it, the beginning had a lot of promise with where we left her and the deception going on, and what happened, you know, the cliffhanger at the end of the last book and all that stuff. I did feel like the middle did get kind of boring for me, and during that time period, again without spoilers, I do feel like the main character Sara is starting to kind of get overshadowed by her sisters. She's definitely involved. I just felt like, how do I explain this? She has a really good chosen one trope going for her, and maybe you hate that trope, maybe you don't, maybe you love it, but for anybody, the chosen one trope has to be done in a good way, or it can be very repetitive and cliche, and I feel like Sara has a very, very good chosen one trope that was kind of set up in the last book that I kind of felt kind of fall flat a little bit, and then things sort of shifted to her sister, her sisters, one or both of them, again not spoiling anything, and I felt like she was started to get, in terms of the chosen one and the main plot line and the person with the powers that was going to have to do certain things, I did feel like her sisters started to overshadow her in that retrospect, even though she was very much the heart of everything going on, and she's the main POV character, and her sisters are not always in the scene, so they weren't overshadowing like her screen time. But in terms of importance and chosen one stuff, I also did feel like there was emphasis on one of the sisters and her potential relationship, but then you hit the battles, and the battles are very, very good, and I felt like, one, Sara J. Maas describes battles really well. I'm really picky with action scenes because I've been in Taekwondo. I'm a big action movie, TV show fan, and I personally love action scenes. I'm the kind of author, there are 2 kinds of people who write action books. There's the people who summarize the action, and then there's the people who write out every detail. And I feel like Sara J. Maas is a really good blend of the 2 of them. She summarizes more than she writes out the action, But for me, it's done in a good way. Normally, I prefer everything to be written out directly. But for me, what impressed me was that she did the style I don't prefer, which is the summarization of the overall battle. But she did it in a way that entertained me. And so for that, I really, like, there was a lot of redemption in that. And there's, like, I want to say 3. Ish. And so they were really intense, really good, and it just kept getting better and better. And so I hit this point where, in the middle, after the boring bits, main plot line kind of picks up, and there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of different plot threads going on, and there's a lot to keep track of, which makes it, like, for me, sometimes the more complicated, the more entertaining the book is, and that's when I couldn't really put it down. And then I started hitting those battle sequences, and it was just like straight shot to the finish for me. So there was a lot of redemption for me in that. I did feel like Feyre was not as important to the fighting, which you don't always have to have a character who fights, as long as that character still has significance to the plot line or to the circumstances going on. Especially in a fantasy, there's magical ways of getting your non-fighter characters involved. With the chosen one trope, there's all kinds of magical chosen one ways you can do that. I still did feel a little bit like she was overshadowed in the boss itself, but then there was some twists and turns and things added in there that kind of made up for it. There was one part in particular that I was kind of like, I'm trying to say this without spoilers, but there's one, again, not spoiling anything, but there is one part at the end toward the boss fight where it feels like Feyre is supposed to do something important, and due to the nature of what's going on, she ends up having to be more of a witness and gets to watch other people take the spotlight. And I felt like, okay, like, it wasn't the fact that she's just witnessing it, because the act of just standing there and not being able to do anything was well explained and had like a magical fantasy reason, which I'm not going to get into. But the fact that she had to watch somebody else be the spotlight was what irritated me, even though what was going on was really dramatic. And I do feel like, because some of these other characters are more important to the plot line and more chosen than she is, not really, because it feels balanced out, but it's a personal nitpick, because I love Feyre's character, and it's not often that I connect with a female character that I don't write, because I'm really picky with female characters, but I'm like defensive against her, for her, on her behalf, I guess, and it's kind of this weird feeling, so it could just be me. But even though, so the events going on and all this stuff that kind of felt like stole the spotlight from her, for me, I would love to see short stories released somewhere to feature those characters and get more in depth with them and let them be the main POV characters, so we can get more of that. I just feel like the focus should have been a little bit more on Feyre in terms of the role that she played in the overall fight, the overall battle, the overall solution, plotline, whatever you want to call it. Now, after that point, there was something extremely dramatic that happened, and it just blew me away. I cried twice reading this. I don't cry while reading very often. I don't read very often, and I read my own books, and so I've cried sometimes. I can't think of any off the top of my head. It's just been not very often that I cry with another author's book, even though I cry in movies a lot. But for me, it's like harder when you're reading versus when you're seeing something and you get to see the actors and actresses' faces and stuff. But I cried twice in this book. I won't tell you when, because I don't want to give you guys spoilers. But both times were super well described, and as an author, I can't help but analyze the writing. And so even though she still has that writing style that's not as tight as indie authors' writing needs to be, because she's famous, she can get by with it, she has a way with words, and her word choices are super dramatic. And I actually feel like in this case, her tendency to use fragments actually worked to make it really dramatic, especially the second one, because the event that was going on needs to have that chaotic kind of like instance where the main character is losing focus, and there's a lot of like clipped, fragmented sentences, because the event going on is so shocking and traumatizing that the fragment sentences made me literally, I was there. I was with the character, I was going through it with them, and that's what made me cry, was because I connected so well with that character and what was going on. And that happened both times, but more so the second time, even though for some reason I cried a little bit more the first time with the first situation. So it was very dramatic. I also feel like, and again, I can't give away spoilers, but I also measure authors by, and even authors, directors, producers, writers, script writers, video game writers, you know, you name it. Anybody who creates a story, storytellers is a good umbrella term. I measure storytellers also by this other thing, and it's whether they are a George R. R. Martin kind of storyteller, or whether they are a, what's another example? A Disney sort of storyteller. And here's the difference, and I'm not talking about the sex, the cussing, the gore, the violence. I'm talking about the act of actually following through with a character death or not. And Disney, the movie, not the movie, the show Supernatural is a very good example. I used to watch that a long time ago. I have a lot of regrets. I wish I hadn't of, but I did. And they had a habit of one brother would die, and then the next season would be about the other brother fighting to get him back, and then they would get him back, and then the result of getting him back put that other brother in a dangerous situation, which resulted in his death or trauma, and then it would just go back and forth for like ever. And so that happened for the majority of the show that I watched, and I only saw up to season 10. And so for me, when you start doing that where you save a character from death, or, and you can save a character from death, I'm not saying that characters should die, like we all want happy endings and stuff, but when you get into a habit of every single time a character gets into a situation, even your side characters, and they always get out of it, and it's always a false alarm, or worse, when you actually have a character actually die, like in Supernatural, and then you bring them back, death kind of loses its meaning, and then you no longer feel threat. Your characters no longer feel like there's a threat because, okay, well, we have this resurrection solution, and so anybody who dies can just, boom, be resurrected. And so for me, doing that kind of ruins some of the dramaticness of it. And so there's every storyteller, regardless of what, like where you're telling the story, whether it's a movie, TV show, book, video game, insert media here, you're either going to be willing to kill your characters off like George R. R. Martin, or you are not, like Disney. Disney kills off parents, but main characters, main heroes, never will die in a Disney movie. So you know when you're watching, like, they did one, which was with Flynn in Tangled, and that was really dramatic, and it actually made me cry when I watched Tangled as an adult, yes, because they tricked me, and I knew they wouldn't leave him dead, but it's just like, so, I'm going on this tangent to say that, it bugs me when you were teased, and they tease a dramatic circumstance that is then easy solution without a lot of effort, work, price to pay, you know what I mean, like stuff like that. And so for me, it bugs me with the characters having this like hedge of protection around them that the author puts on them, because nothing is ever going to harm them. And Sarah J. Maas has shown that she's going to harm her characters and put them through a lot, which is what I love. But I do have some nitpicks about some other situations I just don't want to spoil. And so that's kind of, in this book, it kind of solidified which one of those categories Sarah J. Maas fits into. And the event was super dramatic, and the situation was, and I cried, it was amazing. I just felt like the aftermath of it was not as good as I was hoping it was, and I felt like it was kind of a cheap kind of solution to everything, whereas sometimes you want there to be a price, you want there to be work for the characters have to work for it, another threat coming about because of it, or mistakes made, or, you know, something. But it just, sometimes when your characters get into situations, there's just a really too easy solution to it. Which works for a Disney movie, like Entangled when Rapunzel cries and the tear heals him, but we still get that moment of pause where she's crying and, you know, he's dead and stuff like that. But it's still, that works for a Disney movie because it's a kid's movie. But for an adult situation where you're watching a movie, TV show, or reading a book, there needs to be something more to it, you know. And so I was expecting the aftermath to mention something later. I don't think it's going to get brought up in the next book, but that did bug me. So that kind of was that gives me dual feelings on it, because I loved it at the same time that I didn't like the aftermath of it, which kind of sucks a little bit of my enjoyment of it out. But you guys are probably lost without me telling specifics, but I didn't want to spoil anything. So overall, I half want to give this book a 4-star just because it was boring, and I felt I really got upset at Feyre being overshadowed by her sisters in terms of the importance to the plot line, the powers and abilities. And it's like, okay, everybody's a high Fae now. Everybody can just be turned into a high Fae with special powers. And to me, the I'm a unique person with special powers thing was uniquely Feyre because of what happens to her at the end of the first book. And then all of a sudden now her sisters both have that happen to them, and they're special and they're unique. And it's just like, it feels like it's just getting handed out like candy, and it's just too much. And it's just, it bugged me a lot. Where it should have just been Feyre, and she should be the special one, because then you also have other characters, like there's a side character named Amarin who is the special beast in human form that's been bound. And again, not spoiling, but that character in particular is really special, really intense powers. And so it's one thing for the Fae, like the High Lords each have their own unique special ability, but I would say their power levels, like, they're kind of on equal footing, with the exception of Rhysand. I would say he's probably more powerful. The bad guys are powerful, and so the heroes have to be powerful. But in terms of Feyre being special, she was special. And then now it's just like her sisters were special, and there's everybody special, and it was too much, and it overshadowed her. And that bugs me, and I really wanted to dock it down to 4 stars. But the ending battles are so good, and it was the whole entire, when you hit that point, the whole ending is so dramatic that I really I feel like I have to give it 5 stars just because it was really good. So I'm excited for the 4th book, although I'm really scared because it is tiny. It is super tiny. Like, let me grab it real quick. Alright, so this is book 3, A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is like one chapter of this book. Like, I don't understand. And so it seems like it's like a novella in between books 3 and 4, but this is listed as book 4. So I'm just confused. And I've heard that this is not people's favorites, so I'm really nervous about this book, but, you know, once I read it, I'll review it. If I get through it, we'll see what happens. But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you have, please give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday. This has been my review of A Court of Wings and Ruin Book 3 in Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series. And if you want to watch my review for the first book, then click this video here, because that book is what started this whole entire addiction, and now I can't stop reading this series, so you don't want to miss that video.